It's Series 14 of our MediaCast. Stay tuned for the last 10 minutes where we overview our current, future and past series. This one is on Euro 2024 qualifying. We're looking at Group C: Italy, England, Ukraine, North Macedonia and Malta. Here we go. It's the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada at Series 14. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Connor. And today we are looking at Group C for Euro 2024 qualifying. This group includes Italy, England, Ukraine, North Macedonia, and Malta.
Right, so we usually give some information about the MediaCast at this point, but we're going to save it for the end. So if you want some information about us or the previous series or the upcoming series, stay tuned until the end. Meanwhile, let's get on with it here.
Yeah, so this series features a deep dive into the history of Euro Cup qualifying for each of the teams, and we'll cover the usual information.
Yeah, let's look at the three sections that we'll cover in this MediaCast. So part one, we'll introduce the teams in the group. And then part two, we'll do an in-depth team-by-team overview. This series features a deep dive into the Euro Cup qualifying history. And part three will be a summary and comparison of the teams. And we're going to end with a discussion of the prospects of each team and our predictions.
All right, well, before we begin, tell me something that will get me into this group. What's the hook?
The hook? Revenge.
Revenge.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I won't elaborate on it here, but maybe we'll take it up at the end.
All right, well, let's jump into it.
Okay, let's go through the teams in the group and a bit of a description of where they are and how many people they have.
Yeah, so starting with Italy, nicknamed the Azzurri. Italy has a population of 59 million people, and it's a boot-shaped country in southern Europe, which juts out into the middle of the Mediterranean Sea.
All right, next is England.
England, the Three Lions. England's population is 56.5 million, so just a shade under Italy's. And it's part of the UK. It actually makes up just over half of the UK's area. And it occupies the southeastern portion of the island of Great Britain in the North Atlantic.
All right. Well, next we have Ukraine.
Ukraine, their nickname is Zabirna, the national team, or else the Blue and Yellows. They have a population of 43.5 million. And Ukraine is a large country in Eastern Europe, sitting above the Black Sea. And it's actually the largest country entirely contained within Europe.
Oh, interesting. Okay, our fourth team is North Macedonia.
North Macedonia, their nickname is Rasovi, or the Lynxes. They have a population of 2.1 million people, and North Macedonia is a small landlocked country in southeastern Europe, north of Greece and south of Serbia, and it was formerly part of Yugoslavia.
Right. And finally, we have Malta.
Malta, they're known as the Knights of St. John. They have a population of just over 500,000 people. And Malta is a tiny set of islands in the central Mediterranean, south of Sicily and directly east of Tunisia.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay. Well, you've given the populations individually there, but let's put it all together and compare them directly.
Sure. So Italy and England are very close in terms of population, 59 million people for Italy and 56.5 million for England. Ukraine is also a large country with 43.5 million people. And then the next two countries are much smaller. North Macedonia, 2.1 million. And even that is 4 times the population of Malta, which has a little over 500,000 people.
Right. Okay. Revenge. Let's begin with Italy, and we're moving into section 2 here. So a history of the country. So we're going to do an overview of their participation and achievements first. And let's begin. Italy didn't enter the first World Cup in 1930 or the first Euro Cup in 1960. However, their participation has been consistent since. Until 2008, they had qualified for every World Cup except the 1958 edition. Their consistency was destroyed in recent times with failed campaigns in both 2018 and 2022. So they have won 4 World Cups in all, including the second and the third. Those early cups were tainted with the interference of Mussolini, especially the 1934 Cup, which they hosted. They also won the title in 1982 and 2006. Both of those titles occurring amidst betting scandals in their league. So their recent slump is long and severe. Italy has won only 1 World Cup match since their 2006 title win. That was a statistic you pointed out to me, Connor.
Yeah, in a previous series.
Yeah. Their Euro Cup is much less impressive. Surprisingly, they only qualified 3 out of 8 times between 1964 and 1992, and 2 of those were as host. However, when they did qualify, they did well, winning in 1968. Again, this one involved some divine intervention in the form of a coin toss, and finishing in the top 4 in 1980 and 1988. They qualified consistently from 1996, the year the tournament expanded to 16 teams, and after 2 second-place finishes from that time, they won their second title in 2016. Sorry, that should be 2020. All right, let's go to a World Cup overview. So do you want to take us through that one?
Sure. So in addition to their 4 World Cup titles, Italy have come in second place twice in 1970 and 1994, thus reaching the World Cup final 6 times. They have reached the semifinals 8 times. Italy experienced a dry spell from 1950 to 1966, knocked out at the group stage 4 times out of 5, and then failing to qualify in 1958. And recent times actually rival that. 2010 saw a last place finish in their group behind New Zealand, and that was followed by another group stage exit in 2014. The horror of not qualifying for the Cup in 2018 was compounded when they failed again in 2022. There is something of a pattern in that all 4 of their titles came in tournament stage in Europe, while many of their weak performances, especially in recent times, have come outside of Europe.
All right. Well, let's overview the World Cup, the Euro Cup next. And the Euro Cup was a 4-team tournament from 1960 to 1976 and was thus pretty difficult to reach. Only in 1968 did they do so. The host was chosen from among the final 4 qualifiers, so it gave them no advantage in reaching the Cup, but it did benefit them there in the finals. They took advantage, and 1968 became their first title win. And they qualified for half the tournaments after it expanded to 8 teams in 1980. And after it became 16 teams in 1996, they never failed to qualify. Their best result in the period was a second-place finish in the year 2000. From 2008, they have passed the group stage every time, taking second again in 2012, and then winning their second title in 2020. Ironically, that was between their 2 non-qualifications for the World Cup. All right, now we get to our deep dive, the Euro qualifying history. So do you want to start us off there, Connor?
Of course. So Italy did not enter the inaugural edition in 1960. In the knockout-style qualification of 1964, they passed the first round of 3, but were bested by USSR in the second. 1968 saw a switch to a group-style qualification, and they were imperious, suffering only a tie over the 6 games and finishing far ahead in first place. Since the tournament was only 4 teams, it required a further playoff round, which they won over Bulgaria. The host was chosen from among the 4 qualifiers, and Italy held and won the tournament.
Right, and while this brought to an end a long dry period in their World Cup play, they failed to reach the next 2 Euro Cups. Despite once again going undefeated through the group stage in 1972, they were bested by Belgium in the playoff. And then 1976 saw them fall at the group stage, finishing in 3rd place behind Netherlands and Poland. although they were just a point out of first place.
Pre-selected as host in 1980, they qualified automatically. But 1984 was a terrible campaign where they won only their last game against Cyprus to finish fourth in a five-team group. 1988 saw a return to form, and they finished first ahead of Sweden to take the only qualifying spot.
All right. Well, in 1992, their only loss was to Norway, but too many draws, so the USSR finishing first ahead to take the only spot. And then in 1996, the Cup expanded to 16 teams, and the table afforded direct qualification for the top two spots. That was fortunate for Italy because Croatia, in their first tournament as an independent nation, bested them to finish first. Nevertheless, Italy would qualify for every cup thereafter.
2000 was a tight campaign, just 1 point separating them, Denmark, and Switzerland in the final table. Two ties with Belarus had threatened to spoil their campaign, but they came out on top. 2004 was more convincing, and they again finished in first, 4 points ahead of Wales, the only team to beat them.
Yeah, a poor start in 2008 saw them draw at home with Lithuania and then lose in France. They were ultimately bested by France, but their consistency, winning all other games, saw them finish in first regardless. In 2012, they finished 10 points clear of second place Estonia there, suffering only 2 road draws in the 6-team group.
2016 was also solid, tying Croatia home and away in a quirky pair of games. In the first meeting, they exchanged goals at 11 and 15 minutes. The second leg was almost the same, with the host scoring at 11 minutes again, and this time the visitor equalizing at 36 minutes. The Italian scorer, earning the first goal of his international career of 25 caps in the first game, was also the scorer in the second. Despite the 2 ties, consistency once again saw them through in first, having given up only 1 tie over the other 8 games.
All right, and of course they went on to win that cup. And we're going to take a closer look at the 2 recent cups here. So beginning with the Euro 2020, and how did qualifying go in that one?
Good. And just a correction, they didn't end up winning in 2016.
Oh, yeah, I don't know what's wrong with my head. I have it in my head. Thanks. Okay, this is the one that they won.
Yes, 2020. And it started with a commanding qualification, actually winning all games to finish a distant first in their qualifying group, ahead of Finland, Greece, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Armenia, and Liechtenstein, with a goal record of 37-4 and 4 against.
Wow.
At the tournament, there was an equally commanding group stage, winning all 3 games over Turkey, Switzerland, and with their B team, Wales, to finish first in their group. There, they beat Austria in extra time, then Belgium in the quarterfinals before beating Spain and then England, both on penalties, to win their second Euro title, having won their first as host in 1968.
Right, and that final was at Wembley, wasn't it?
It was. So this is our first chance to say revenge, because England will meet them here.
That's right. England will be looking. I think that really will be on their minds in this campaign. Let's take a look at their World Cup 2022 campaign.
So Italy tied group winner Switzerland twice, but they also tied at home to Bulgaria and in Northern Ireland. So they finished second in the qualifying group. That brought them to a playoff stage. And in the semifinal, they looked to win on a penalty at 90 minutes, but missed it, only to see North Macedonia win on an injury time goal.
Revenge!
Revenge. They'll meet North Macedonia here. So that upset caused them to be absent from a second World Cup in a row.
Wow, that's got to be very real to them, hey, to get a bit of revenge over that loss.
Yeah, they were completely dominant out in that game, out shooting them. I think they had over 30 shots on 30 attempts at goal, but could not break through.
Wow. Well, the last thing they participated in as the, at least the last, was the 2022-23 UEFA Nations League. How did they do there?
Italy were in a really tough group with Germany, England, and then also Hungary. But Italy won it. They had 3 wins, 2 draws, and just a single loss, a 5-2 loss in Germany. But they tied England away and then beat England 1-0. England, who are relegated from that group. So revenge will be on England's mind for another reason.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's a bit humiliating for England to be demoted to League B there. So they will definitely be looking for some payback there, I would guess.
Yeah, and of course, Italy as the group winners will compete in the 4-team final for the League A Nations League.
Right, and that's in June 2023, right?
That's right.
Okay, great. Well, let's take a quick overview of their players. So, with the exception of 38-year-old Giorgio Chiellini, most of the big names that won the 2020 Euro Cup remain. A few of them are hitting their 30s, most notably defender Leonardo Bonucci, who's 35. But a number of the stars were actually young, and so they remain in their prime here. And that includes goalkeeper Donnarumma and forward Federico Chiesa, for example. A few are on display on the international teams, including a bit of an odd relationship with Canada's Toronto FC. You may know that a bit more intimately than me. But yeah, I'll let you comment on that. But most of them are still in Italy with their top teams, the top teams in Italy. Also, manager Roberto Mancini retains his position despite their failure to qualify for the recent World Cup. Yeah, tell me a little bit about the Toronto members.
Yeah, they have had, again, not a lot of Italy internationals play outside Europe, but there have been a couple with Toronto FC. Sebastian Giovinco was formerly, and then currently they have Lorenzo Insigne and Federico Bernardeschi, who are both, made their name in Italy and have had pretty good careers. So, playing in Toronto is a bit of a pipeline, I guess, from Italy to Toronto that way.
Yeah, I remember Giovinco had a bit of trouble getting onto the team, partly because he was with Toronto. Do you think that's going to be the case with the guys you mentioned?
It might be. I do think, they weren't perceived as being on, Giovinco wasn't perceived as being on a top club, but he was a bit on the fringes anyway. So, it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. All right, well, that brings us to the end of Italy, and we move on to take a look at England, beginning with their participation and achievements. So England is the oldest soccer country, but actually not a senior team in the World Cup. The game was invented in England, and what is considered the first international match was played between England and Scotland in 1872. Before 1950, they had a dispute as FIFA was setting up in 1928, and they refused to join the World Cup in those pre-war years, playing instead with the home nations teams in the British Home Championship. After reconciling with FIFA in 1946, they participated in every World Cup since 1950. In the Euro competition, they also didn't participate in the first edition in 1960, but they have participated consistently since. Though seen as a dominant power due to their history, their league, and their strong qualifying record, especially in recent times, they have only won one major competition, and that was the World Cup in 1966 when they hosted it. They have never won the Euro Cup, and second place in 2020 is their best result there, with third place finishes in 1968, along with the semi-final finish when they hosted in 1996. All right, let's take a look at an overview of their World Cup.
So as you mentioned, England did not participate in World Cup play before the Second World War. They consistently qualified from 1950 through 1966 when they won it until 1970. In 1974, they failed to qualify and shocked even further by failing in 1978 also.
That's an interesting parallel to Italy here, hey?
Yeah, that's right, the 2 non-qualifications. England also failed to qualify in 1994. Similarly, they failed to pass the group stage 3 times, most famously in a shocking loss to USA in their first World Cup in 1950. and then again in 1958. And then it was 2014 that made it a third time. Otherwise, they've reached the quarterfinals more than half the time, though fourth place in 1990 is their second best result.
Right, and do we have any revenge in that 2014 group stage exit? Because Italy was in that group.
They were, but no revenge, as both Italy and England failed to qualify from that group.
All right, well, our theme doesn't carry through there. But we continue on with the Euro Cup overview. And their Euro Cup record is actually weaker than their World Cup record. They qualified only once over their first four entries when the tournament consisted of four teams. That successful qualification was in 1968, and they finished third. When the Cup expanded to 8 teams in 1980, they reached 3 of the 4 editions, but were knocked out at the group stage every time. The Cup expanded to 16 teams in 1996, and they hosted the first edition of the expanded Cup. They reached the semi-finals there, and there was no third place match, so we can consider it like a third place finish. They fell at the group stage in 2004 and didn't reach the Cup in 2008, but otherwise they have passed the group stage every time since 1996, apart from those 2. That included 3 times in a row from 2012, culminating in their best result in 2020, a second place finish. Okay, let's go on to the deep dive of Euro Cup qualifying. Take it away.
So England, along with West Germany, Italy, and several smaller teams, did not participate in the first Euro Cup in 1960. They were ousted quickly in the first of 3 rounds in 1964, bested by France, who had just finished 4th in the first Cup. From 1968, qualification became a group stage followed by a playoff to narrow the field to 4 teams. Though bested by Scotland in the group stage, they came first and also won both legs of the playoff to reach the 1968 Cup.
Okay, sorry, I was a little slow with the graphics there. Okay, well, they wouldn't reach it again, however, until 1980, making the 1970 World Cup the only tournament they reached in that decade. 1972 was a good qualification run at the group stage, giving up points only with a tie at home to Switzerland. The first place finish brought them to a playoff with West Germany. The 2 had shared world drama in recent years, England winning the World Cup final over West Germany on a questionable goal in 1966, and West Germany knocking them out of the 1970 World Cup in extra time of the quarterfinal. In this meeting, Germany won the battle too, winning 3-1 in England on 2 late goals and holding England then to a goalless draw in Germany. Exciting qualification there, but England didn't make it. 1976 was a battle, exchanging equally with Czechoslovakia and Portugal, and finish in second place in between them. So second place, not an advancing position there.
The Cup expanded to 8 teams in 1980, and England reached it with a dominant campaign. A tie in Ireland, the only points dropped to finish 6 points clear of first. Denmark finishing bottom of the 5-team group. 1984, however, saw them bested by Denmark, who won the group, a home draw with Greece costing England the qualification spot. They came back from that with a strong campaign similar to 1980, suffering only a draw in Turkey to finish top of the table in 1988.
Right. Well, 1992 saw them finish in first place ahead of Ireland and Poland, just 2 points separating the top 3 there. 1996, they didn't need any qualification because they were the hosts of the newly expanded Cup of 16 teams. So we move on to 2000, which was pretty unconvincing. It began with a loss in Sweden, but too many ties left them in second place, actually fully 9 points behind the Swedes. It nevertheless got them to a playoff with Scotland, and the 2 exchanged away wins, but England went through on goal difference.
All right, despite a home draw with Macedonia in 2004, it was a strong campaign. Nevertheless, it came down to the last game in Turkey. A goalless draw there was enough for England to finish 1 point ahead of the Turks in first. 2008 also saw them tying Macedonia, and this time it cost dearly.
Revenge!
Revenge. Really, losses to Russia and Croatia in the last two games did the damage. But that they were only 1 point behind second place meant that 2 points lost to Macedonia would have landed them in second.
Yeah, which was an automatic qualifying spot there. 2012 saw them tying second place Montenegro twice and third place Switzerland at home for a comfortable first place finish there. And then 2016 was a perfect campaign in an E group, winning all games, Switzerland finishing second this time. All right, well, we will go for a closer look at the Euro 2020 campaign. So, it looks like I didn't actually put up the games, but maybe you can talk us through them there, Connor.
Yeah. So England stormed through an easy qualifying group. They actually scored 37 goals over their 10 games and dropped points only in an away loss to Czech Republic. Kosovo, Bulgaria, and Montenegro were the other teams. In the tournament, England played almost all games at home at Wembley Stadium in London, except the quarterfinal match, which was played in Rome. They beat Croatia and Czech Republic in single-goal games and went scoreless with Scotland to finish first in the group. They beat Germany and then Ukraine, and then in the semifinals, Denmark in extra time. In the final, they lost to Italy on penalties, young and inexperienced players missing their last three shots.
Yeah, that's right. That was a bit baffling. Penalties just seem to get the better of England, don't they?
Yeah, time after time.
Right. Well, let's take a look at the World Cup, their most recent big campaign. And do you want to talk us through that one?
Yeah, so it was another solid qualification campaign, tying only in Poland and then at home to Hungary and finishing first in the qualifying groups, 6 points ahead of second place Poland. At the tournament, an exciting win over Iran was followed by a fearsomely dull scoreless draw with the USA. That was 90 minutes I'll never get back. It was a comfortable win over Wales that earned them first place in the group stage. And then after beating Senegal, they lost to France in the quarterfinals, gifted a chance to equalize at 84 minutes with a penalty shot, but Harry Kane shot over the bar.
Yeah, there we go. Penalties getting the better of them again. You were coming in and out a bit there, so I don't know if it came across clearly that the round of 16 win there was over Senegal.
Right.
Okay, well, let's take a look at the 2022 UEFA Nations League campaign, and that's a bit of a shocker. Do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah. England failed to win any of their 6 games in League A. They started with an away loss to Hungary and actually lost to Hungary 4-0 at home in the reverse fixture. And then after that, they tied Germany twice, and then it was a win or a loss and a draw with Italy. So they finished with just 3 points, 4 back of Germany, and are relegated to League B.
Wow. Well, they have a pretty interesting history with Hungary. I can't remember exactly how it went, but I think it was in the 50s when Hungary was kind of considered the strongest team in the world, and England went to play them, and I think they got demolished by Hungary. I think Hungary have always gotten the better of England.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, that I think we talked about that in the World Cup series, but we'll stay on topic here and finish with players for England. So England hasn't suffered any retirements, and even their veteran players like Harry Kane and Kieran Trippier have a tournament or two left in them. Almost all of the players play in Britain, and it seems that players run the danger of falling off the radar if they play abroad. That's kind of like what we were talking about with Italy and Toronto, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Some of England's young stars like Bukayo Saka and Phil Foden already seem well established on the squad, so they have many years ahead of them. England, on the whole, has a good runway ahead in terms of the squad.
Yeah, like you said, very few players retiring out of the squad, and a very promising young core. So I think the future looks bright for England.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to our third team and take a look at their participation and achievements first. So it's not widely known that the Ukraine did have a team semi-independent of the USSR from 1925 to 1935, though there is a record of a game in 1928 and a couple of others besides. They're not recognized officially, and so their first official match is given as in 1992. Prior to that, Ukraine was the main feeder nation to the strong USSR teams. Ukraine's formation was too late for the 1994 World Cup qualifying. The qualifying had begun in 1991. So their first entry was to Euro 1996, and they have participated consistently in both tournaments since. Ukraine is a team always on the edge of qualifying. In terms of achievements, they've reached only one World Cup, despite coming close most of the time. They made the best of their successful qualification in 2006, reaching the quarterfinals of the World Cup there. They failed to qualify for the first 4 Euro Cup campaigns and qualified for their first in 2012 only by dint of hosting. Since then, they have earned qualification, 2020 making it 3 appearances in a row. 2020 was also the year they passed the group stage for the first time, a quarterfinal finish, their best result in that competition also. All right, let's take a bit of a closer look at the World Cup in an overview.
All right, so in World Cup qualification, Ukraine reached the UEFA playoff 5 out of their 7 campaigns since their first in 1998, and have lost every time.
Oh, wow.
The exceptions are a third place finish in 2018, so when they fell short of the playoff, and 2006, where they finished atop their qualifying group to reach their only World Cup. There they passed the group stage and in the round of 16 beat Switzerland on penalties to reach the quarterfinals, so a really impressive run.
Yeah, in 2006, but otherwise didn't make it. Let's take a look at their Euro Cup overview. In contrast to their usual playoff round finish in the World Cup action, as we saw, they have only been knocked out at that stage once in Euro Cup play. That was in 2000, but in the campaign before, as well as in the 2 after, they were knocked out before reaching that level. In fact, 2 of the campaigns features 4th place finishes, their worst results in either competition. However, from 2012, they have reached the tournament 3 times in a row, aided by co-hosting in 2012, as we saw, and by the tournament expanding in 2016. They didn't need that benefit in 2020, though, as they finished first in their group, ahead of Portugal to earn automatic qualification, and by earning their best result once there, beating Sweden in extra time in the round of 16 to reach the quarterfinal. Okay, now let's jump on into the deep dive. Their history here is not so long. It begins in 1996. Do you want to take it away?
Yeah, Ukraine's first campaign in 1996 was ghastly, as they finished 4th behind a surprise Lithuania. The only good result was a home win over top of the table Croatia. 2000 saw them finding their feet and going undefeated in their campaign. They tied France twice, but it was too many draws, disappointingly in the cases of Iceland at home and Armenia away, which saw them finish still just a point behind France in second. Besting Russia and finishing a point ahead of them would have been satisfying, though. Nevertheless, it took them to a playoff where they were bested by Slovenia, who were in a strong period, Slovenia reaching the Euro Cup and World Cup after that.
Right. Okay, well, 2004 was, in retrospect, a bit unlucky. They were paired with Spain, the strongest team in Europe, strongest qualifying team, and they faced a Greece in the form of their career For Spain's part, they failed to win their only campaign and gave up their only home loss that they've suffered since 1992. So a pretty dramatic and historical group there. Ukraine, despite going undefeated at home, were no match for either and finished a distant third.
2008 continued the poor run with another fourth-place finish. A tie at home to France completed a good home record, where they otherwise only lost to Italy. But a poor road record saw them finishing behind third-place Scotland in the 17 group.
Yeah, I'm not sure this one fits into the revenge category, but let's throw it into the pile anyway.
All right, revenge.
Okay, 2012, hosting brought them to their first Euro Cup. They qualified automatically, of course, there. And then they managed to earn passage to the Cup in 2016, thanks, though, in large part to the Cup expanding. Their third place finish in qualifying would not normally have been an advancing spot, but it did earn them a playoff spot here. And they once again faced Slovenia, who they had met, as we saw, in 2000. That was their last playoff in Euro Cup action. And this time they did better, besting Slovenia and reaching the Cup, their second Cup. Okay, now let's take a closer look at 2020, because that was recent. And we'll begin with their qualifying campaign, but also look at the finals there.
Yeah, so 2020 was more deserving. They had an excellent campaign where they bested Portugal and Serbia, drawing in the away leg in each, to finish first in the qualifying group. They won all their games also against bottom dwellers Luxembourg and Lithuania. Despite being the top seed of their group at the tournament, they lost to the Netherlands and Austria, but beat North Macedonia to finish third in the group stage for the advancing position. They beat.
Sorry, just want to bring up the revenge theme again. North Macedonia will be looking for some payback here.
It was, and that was actually a crucial game, because the winner of that game was the one that went through.
Oh, it's true, yeah.
Even though it was the second match.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, they did advance out of the group stage in third place out of 4. But then they beat Sweden in extra time in the knockout round, in the round of 16. However, they were no match for England in the quarterfinals, losing heavily 4-0.
4-0 thrashing, which Ukraine might seek revenge for. All right. Well, let's move on to the next competition, World Cup 2022, and let's see how they did there.
So this was actually a bit of an odd campaign. Ukraine tied all their games, including both with group winner France, except for wins in Finland and Bosnia-Herzegovina. So they went actually undefeated. However, it only meant second place in the qualifying group, a point ahead of Finland and 6 behind France.
Yeah, 2 draws with Kazakhstan there. Wasn't that good?
Yeah, and drawing all 4 of their home games.
Right.
Nevertheless, it took Ukraine to the playoffs, where after a delay caused by Russia's invasion, they won in Scotland in a semifinal, but then lost on an own goal, the only goal of the game, in Wales. Probably the whole world was cheering for Ukraine in that game, except for Welsh fans, us included.
Yeah, well, we can't help it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was nevertheless, they fell at the final hurdle, but didn't make it to the World Cup.
That's right. Okay, well, let's take a look at the 2022-23 UEFA Nations League.
So Ukraine were in League B. They won their first 2 games away in Ireland and home to Armenia, but then only won 1 of their next 4. And they were, that game they won was a 5-0 win in Armenia, but they ended up tying and losing to Scotland, who won the group. So Ukraine were second of 4 and will remain in League B for the next edition of the Nations League.
Yeah, a bit all over the place there. I wonder if the domestic turmoil had an effect there.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll finish by talking a bit about Ukrainians players. So they may be facing some big-name retirements here. 38-year-old goalkeeper Andriy Piatov and 33-year-old Andrei Yarmolenko, who is, anyway, they have 215 caps between them. They didn't play in the March games, the openers of this tournament or of this qualification round, and their status is unclear. 33-year-old Yevhen Konyapenko remains. Most of their biggest club affiliations are young players. So Arsenal's Alexander Zinchenko seems almost like a veteran on the team now, but he's only 26 years old. And Everton's Vitaly Myalenko and Chelsea's Mikhailo Mudryk are 23 and 22 respectively. Goalkeeper Andre Lunin with Real Madrid is 24 years old. So about a third of the players are with respectable European clubs outside of the Ukraine, but the majority play at home, mostly for their big clubs, Shakhtar Donetsk, Dynamo Kiev, and Dnipro. Okay, any comments on that, or should we move on?
Yeah, let's move on to our fourth team, North Macedonia.
Yes, North Macedonia. So we'll start with their participations and achievements. They were part of Yugoslavia before the breakup in 1992, and their roughly 2 million people made up about 9% of the pre-1992 Yugoslavia. They broke away while Serbia and other regions continued for a time as Yugoslavia FR. They first participated as an independent nation in Euro 1996 qualification and then in World Cup 1998 qualification, never missing a tournament since. In 2019, they settled a long-standing dispute with Greece over their name, and they became North Macedonia. In terms of achievement, they have never come close to qualifying until recently, always finishing in the bottom half of the group, second or third last. This dropped to a last place finish in 2014 World Cup and 2016 Euro Cup qualifications. However, a dramatic improvement began from the middle of their 2018 World Cup campaign and saw them finish in the top half of the table in 2020 and 2022. In both cases, they continued to a playoff structure, and in 2020, they won both rounds, one of them over no, I'm getting confused again. In 2020, they won both rounds of that playoffs to qualify for the Euro Cup, their first tournament. Okay, let's jump to World Cup.
So North Macedonia, then known simply as Macedonia, had their first World Cup campaign in 1998. They performed well there, finishing a competitive fourth of six. Campaigns became weaker after that, culminating in a bottom-of-the-table finish in their 16 group in 2014. The 2018 campaign started poorly but took a turn halfway through. It did not result in a better finish that year, but the form continued into 2022, where they finished second in the table, taking them to a playoff structure where they passed the first round, knocking out Italy, but falling in the second.
Of course, that's where they beat Italy, and we've talked about revenge for that case. Let's take an overview of the Euro Cup. So the pattern in Euro Cup roughly parallels that of their World Cup record. The difference is that they didn't grow weaker after their first campaign in 1996, but were more steadily a middle finisher, though always in the bottom half of the table. They did grow weaker from 2012, though, and finished bottom of the table for the first time in 2016. The subsequent improvement was reflected in their third place finish in Euro 2020 qualifying, their first finish in the top half of the table there. It was not that, however, that earned them a place in the playoff structure. It was their 2018-19 UEFA Nations League result. Their performance in League D offered something of a backdoor, or perhaps a golden ticket, into the Euro Cup, and they took advantage, winning a playoff amongst weak teams to reach their first tournament. So we'll take a closer look at that because it was recent. And now let's jump into our deep dive, their Euro Cup qualifying history.
So Macedonia began their first ever campaign in 1996 with a home draw against Denmark. Their third game was a tie in Belgium, and they beat Cyprus after that. It looked like they would challenge for a top half finish, but in the second half of the campaign, they earned only draws in Armenia and Cyprus. They finished in fourth ahead of those two, but well below third place to establish a long pattern of finishing in the bottom half. So they also established a pattern of being a spoiler team, taking points in almost every campaign from bigger teams, sometimes ruining their campaigns.
Okay. Let's take a look at 2000. And home draws with Croatia and Ireland were their best result in 2000. But otherwise, they only beat Malta twice and finished ahead of them, fourth or fifth there. The home draw with Ireland in the last game spoiled Ireland's campaign.
Ties in England and Slovakia made 2004 a similar campaign. They only bested weak Liechtenstein there to finish fourth ahead of them. They earned 3 draws on the row, but only the one win over Liechtenstein, as I mentioned.
Right. Okay, well, 2008 saw them tie England away again, and it ultimately cost England a spot in the cup.
Revenge!
A home win over group winner Croatia was a glorious result. With 2 weak teams in the group, they finished 5th of 7th, well behind 4th place Israel.
The best result in 2012 was a home draw in the last game against Slovakia. They were bested by a surprising Armenia, who finished 3rd, while they finished 5th of 6, ahead only of Andorra. 2016 was weaker still with no spoiler results. A home win over Luxembourg and a tie in Belarus were their only points, and they finished behind both, last in the 16 group.
That's right. And we'll take a closer look at 2020, but I want to point out again that there was a real big turnaround in their 2018 World Cup campaign, where they were poor in the first half, but very strong in the second half. And then they kind of brought that form into this cup. Let's take a look.
Yeah, so they came 3rd in the qualifying round, which was a group stage, losing both to Poland and Austria, who finished ahead of them, but besting Slovenia and Israel, who finished behind North Macedonia. North Macedonia also won both over Latvia, who came last. So 14 points from 10 games was their record. But their Nations League performance in the lowest group earned them a place in the playoffs. That was a 4-team playoff. They beat Kosovo at home in the semifinal, and then beat Georgia away in the final on a single goal to earn the golden ticket to the cup. Reaching the cup proved the limit of their achievement because once there, they lost all 3 games to Austria, Netherlands, and Ukraine to finish last in the group stage.
Yeah, and as you said, that second game lost to Ukraine. I don't know. They would have gone through in 3rd, I suppose, if they had won that game.
Yeah, they were a bit out of their depth, but they gave some spirited performances, North Macedonia.
Yeah, and it may give them a bit of confidence coming into this round that they can take on teams like that.
Yeah.
Did I interrupt you there?
Nope, we can move on.
Okay, let us take a look at the World Cup 2022 campaign.
So North Macedonia came in as a 4th seed, but finished 2nd in the 16 group stage with a glorious and shocking win at the home of group winners Germany.
Wow.
They were bested by 2nd seed Romania, but themselves bested Iceland and Armenia, and suffered only 2 losses in the campaign. It brought them to the regional playoff where they knocked out Italy on an injury time winning goal, but they fell at the last step to Portugal.
All right, some serious revenge coming for that. Okay, well, let's take a look at their 2022-23 UEFA Nations League to see how they did there.
So North Macedonia were in League C. They started with an away draw with Bulgaria, and then a win on the road in Gibraltar. But after that, they only beat Gibraltar at home, losing the 3 other games. That's 2 games to Georgia, and then also at home to Bulgaria. So they finished third of 4, well ahead of Gibraltar. but also well behind group winners Georgia, and will remain in League C for the next edition.
Yeah, League C. Okay, well, let's finish with a look at the players here. And more than half of the players are with clubs outside of North Macedonia, although they do tend to be lesser clubs. The players with the biggest affiliations are Alioski, Ezcan Alioski with Fenerbahce. He was with Leeds, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Enes Bardi with Trabzonspor in Turkey. Actually, both of those are Turkish clubs. And they also have Elijah Nestorovsky with Udinese in Italy, and Elif Elmas with Napoli, also an Italian club. So Alioski and Nestorovsky there are both in their 30s, and the team is aging with a number of key players in their 30s. Napoli's Elif Elmas, though, is 23 years old, and he's one of only 3 players of that age with 10 caps or more. So there seems to be a good pool of young players available, although few of them have worked their way into the team to any degree.
Yeah, Elmas, of course, with a Napoli team that's totally dominant in Serie A this season. He's played a lot for them, so having a really good campaign.
Oh, all right. Cool. All right, let's move on to our last team, which is Malta. And let's begin with an overview of their participation and achievements. So Malta has an impressively long history as far as smaller European countries go. They first entered the Euro Cup qualification in 1964, and with the exception of 1986, have entered every edition since. They joined World Cup action a little later in 1974 and have participated consistently since then. In terms of achievement, though, they have little to hang their hat on. The infusion of similarly weak teams in the 1990s did afford them one finish above last place in 1994, but they have since always finished last in their campaigns, even when there's been another weak team in the group. So success is only measured at the game level with the smattering of points that they earn. Their goals record, surprisingly, has usually been respectable since 1988. Only in a couple of campaigns have they averaged higher than 3 goals against per game. Usually it's around 2.5, but a good campaign by this measure was 2016, where they averaged just 1.6 goals against per game. Okay, let's take a look at the World Cup overview.
So from their first World Cup entry in 1974, they lost all games until their third entry in 1986, where they earned a goalless draw with Czechoslovakia. Since then, they have earned at least a draw in every campaign except one. 1994 was the best result, besting Estonia to mark the only campaign where they did not finish bottom. That was followed by their only campaign losing all games in 1998. 2022 qualifying saw them earning 5 points, but although they bested Cyprus there, they finished tied on points but behind them on goal difference for another last place finish.
All right, well, European Cup play is similar, except that they have taken bigger results here. A draw with West Germany in 1980 was probably their biggest result. 2000 was the only time they lost all games, and 2008 saw them earn 5 points, including a win over Hungary. Recently, finishing behind Azerbaijan in 2016 and Faroe Islands in 2020 emphasized their relative weakness. Okay, let's take a deep dive into their European qualifying history, which begins pretty close to the beginning.
Yeah, so Malta did not enter the first Euro Cup in 1960, but they did participate in 1964. They were knocked out quickly in the first round by Denmark, losing 6-1 in their first ever qualifying game, and then 3-1 in the away leg. They did not enter in 1968, but participated consistently from 1972.
Yeah, there was little chance of finishing out of last place. What few weak teams existed at that time were put into other groups, leaving Malta to contend with stronger teams only at the game level. So their success can be measured only in as far as they earned upsets over the bigger teams, which they did in virtually every campaign. So 1972, for example, saw them tie third place Greece in the opening game, and they victimized Greece again in 1976, beating them at home to damage a more competitive campaign where Greece finished second.
1980 was their biggest scalp, a home draw with the powerful West Germany, who would go on to win the cup. 1984 opened with a home win over Iceland, and who finished only a point ahead of them. But as we will see, Malta often eschewed the few opportunities they were given to be competitive at the campaign level. They lost 1-0 to Iceland in the away leg and lost only 1-0 at home to Ireland, but both games gave them an opportunity to make up that point. That campaign ended suspiciously. Spain needed to win the last game by an 11 goal margin to finish first ahead of Netherlands. Malta held it to 3-1 by halftime, but then allowed 9 goals in the second half, giving Spain exactly what they needed. This suspicion of foul play led to the final games of qualification rounds now being played simultaneously.
Right. Well, 2 draws in the 1988 campaign saw them tying Portugal away and Switzerland at home. Portugal was not a strong team at the time, and Malta lost only 1-0 in the reverse fixture there. Home draws with Finland and Greece were the only points in 1992, and in 1996. 1996 was worse still, with a single draw at home to the Czech Republic, although Czech Republic were the group winners there.
2000 saw them losing all games, having done so also in 1998 World Cup qualification, the only time they've suffered that in their history of group campaigns. A single draw in the 2004 campaign salvaged them from the same fate, this time against Israel in the away leg. 2008 was a good campaign with their first Euro qualifying win since 1984. This was over Hungary, and they tied the following game in Moldova. Further home draws with Turkey earned them a further home draw with Turkey earned them 5 points, but they still finished last, 12 points behind second to last Hungary in the 17 group.
Yeah, actually 7 points behind. I think I made a mistake there. 2012 fell back, though. A single draw in Georgia was the only point there, and they lost twice to Latvia. A chance to challenge a weak team was also available in 2016, but it was also spurned when they were bested by Azerbaijan. A tie in Bulgaria was their only other point in 2016. And now let's move on to their most recent Euro Cup campaign in 2020.
So Malta actually won the campaign opener at home to Faroe Islands, but those were their only points, and they ultimately finished behind them, tied on points, but with the inferior away goals record in their head-to-head meetings. So they finished last in the qualifying group with a goals record of 3 scored and 27 against. Spain, Sweden, Norway, and Romania were the other teams in the group.
Yeah, so another chance there to finish outside the bottom, but they missed it. Let's see if they did any better in 2022 World Cup qualifying.
So this is one of their best results in terms of points, and one of their only campaigns where they have challenged a team above them. They bested Cyprus, but still finished behind them, last in the qualifying group, because they otherwise only managed to draw in Slovenia, while Cyprus had a few of their typical spoiler results.
Right, I think that was Slovakia there.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, not a bad campaign, 5 points there. Let's finish by seeing how they did in their latest UEFA Nations League campaign in 2022 and 23. That was League D.
Yeah, the bottom tier where they're actually playing again teams of similar stature. And Malta were grouped with San Marino and Estonia, and they beat San Marino twice but lost to Estonia twice. And they finished right in the middle of the 3-team group. So they'll remain in League D for the next edition.
All right. Well, let's close with a look at their players. They do have a handful of players with clubs outside of Malta. The biggest is Teddy Chuma, who plays with Belgian Union Saint-Gilloise, the club that won the Belgian League on the year of their promotion. Firenze in Portugal, Notts County in England, and St Johnstone in Scotland are their next biggest club affiliations. And the current squad does have age on its side, but a few are showing particular promise as most remain. But few are showing particular promise as most of them remain playing in Malta. So no goal scorer has emerged. Their top scorer, Jurgen de Gabriel, who plays in Malta, has 6 goals, and then no one else has more than 3. I don't know, Connor, if you remember Michael Misford.
Yeah, he played with Coventry City in the English Championship.
All right. Yeah, he was their top scorer. He got 42 goals in 143 games, but he retired in 2020 at the age of 40. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of the long team-by-team overview, and we're going to move on to part 3. That's a comparison of the teams, and it begins with a look at the rankings.
That's right. So pot order was determined by the results of the last Nations League, so they don't necessarily correspond with world or ELO rankings. So Italy are the pot 1 team. They were 4th in Europe at the time of the draw, and are currently 8th in the world in both FIFA and ELO rankings, though they actually dropped into the teens for much of the kind of late 2010s due to their failures to reach the World Cups.
Yeah, and as you say, like England is the pot 2 team here, not because of their FIFA or ELO rankings, but because of their, I guess, relegation from League A there in the Nations League.
That's right. Yeah, that poor Nations League performance put them in pot 2. They are 5th in the world in FIFA and 8th in ELO. So similar, but just ahead of Italy in the FIFA rankings. But unlike Italy, England have actually been in the top 5 in FIFA for several years now, going back to December 2018.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, Ukraine is the 3rd team, the pot 3 team, and 22nd in Europe. How are they in the other rankings?
Very similar, actually probably higher because of the international nature of the ranking systems, but 26th in the world currently in FIFA and 20th in ELO. They've actually been consistently higher in kind of the more reliable ELO rankings, but they've kind of ranged in the 20s or just above 20th in both systems. So they are seen as quite a strong team worldwide, despite their pot 3 ranking.
Yeah, and we'll have to see what kind of impact the war has on their performance here. 4th team is North Macedonia in pot 4.
Yeah, they're currently 65th in FIFA and 76th in ELO. You mentioned kind of their good form in the 2018 World Cup campaign and onwards, and that's being reflected in their rankings. Previously, they were below 100 or around 100 in the world rankings, dropping to 162nd in December 2016. But they've been in the 60s for basically the last 5 years, corresponding with those good competitive World Cup and Euro campaigns.
Yeah, that's a good move up. Yeah, in the ELO rankings, it was just dipping below 100, but in the crazy FIFA rankings, jumped all the way down to 162, which was probably never true.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, we have Malta.
Yeah, so Malta, they're the pot 5 team. They were 52nd in Europe at the time of the draw, which puts them kind of near the bottom of UEFA teams. They're currently 167th in FIFA and 145th in the ELO rankings. And those really have been consistent for quite some time, kind of ranging between 160 to 180 in FIFA and closer to the 160 mark or 150, so a little bit higher in the ELO rankings.
Yeah. Well, they do get the odd results, so they have moved up slightly. But we'll talk about whether we expect to see them get any results here. Let's go through the head-to-head, and we've kind of organized them into the teams that have the winning record. So we begin with Italy. Maybe, Connor, if you give the record, and I'll add any details if necessary.
Yeah, Italy actually has a relatively dominant record over England. They've met 8 times. Italy have won 6 of those, and they've just tied and lost 1 each.
Yeah, and they've met actually in the World Cup and in the latter stages of the World Cup several times in 1990, and or I should say in cups, because it was Euro Cup in 2012, and of course the 2020 Euro Cup final most recently, where Italy won on penalties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the last 3 times they met in tournament finals, Italy have won all 3.
Yeah, yeah. So England really get the better of England.
All right.
Yeah.
Italy versus Ukraine. Italy's even more dominant. They've met 5 times, and Italy have won all 5.
That's right. And 2008 was the last time they met, so not a strong element of revenge between them.
Yeah. Italy and North Macedonia have an even record: 1 win, 1 draw, and 1 loss each.
Right. Well, they met in the 2018 World Cup qualifying round, and Italy bested them there, but North Macedonia did tie it home. And then, of course, that playoff round shock win, which actually took place in Italy, North Macedonia knocking knocking Italy out of the World Cup, really fits in with the revenge theme.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's an important point to mention. That game was played in Italy as well.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on, Italy versus Malta. No surprise that Italy's won all 8 of the games in which the 2 teams have met.
Yeah, most recent meeting in the 2016 Euro Cup qualifying there, Italy winning both again. All right, let's take a look at England's record. So Italy have better records over all 4 teams here, and England have better records over 3 teams.
Yeah, so England have played Ukraine 6 times, and England's record is 3 wins, 2 draws, and a loss.
Yeah, a lot of those games have been fairly recent, actually, from 2010 onwards. Most recently in the 2020 Euro Cup quarterfinal, where England basically smashed Ukraine, winning 4-0.
Yeah, England and North Macedonia, they've met 4 times. It's 2 wins and 2 draws, the overall record in England's favor.
That's right. So England have never beaten North Macedonia in North Macedonia. 2 ties in both of their meetings there.
Right, and then England and Malta, they've met 4 times, and England have won all 4 times.
Yeah, 1972 and then 2018 were their 2 meetings, home and away. Okay, and then Ukraine. Ukraine it does have better records than the teams below them.
Yeah, that's 3 wins from 3 over North Macedonia.
Yeah, 2020. All of those are very recent, actually. 2016 Euro qualifying and 2020 Euro Cup group stage, as we saw. Ukraine beating North Macedonia to earn their passage.
And then Ukraine and Malta, they've actually never met, so no wins for either team so far.
Yeah, my mistake. I said Ukraine had a winning record, but they've never met. And finally, North Macedonia does have a better record than Malta.
Yeah, they've played twice, and both games have gone in North Macedonia's favor.
Right, but that was a long time ago in the 2000 Euro qualifying round, so not much of a grudge between them. All right, let's move on to pots and odds. We wanted to take a look at where they come from, where the teams come from in each pot, because sometimes it can be a bit deceptive if one team is at the bottom of, say, pot 3 and another team is at the top of pot 4. There's not much between them. So tell us where they're from in the pots, Connor.
Yeah, so Italy were 4th ranked overall. They won their Nations League A group, and which was used for the rankings. So Italy were 4th overall. England were 15th overall. And so although they're kind of close to the middle of pot 2, you could argue as Euro 2020 finalists that they are artificially low because of their Nations League A relegation.
Yeah, it's not really a measure of their strength because they're definitely stronger than Austria and Czech Republic, who are ahead of them, but a reflection of their performance in the UEFA League. A bit divorced from their strength, overall strength, though.
That's right. And then Ukraine were the top-ranked team in pot 3, so that could mean they're a little bit more dangerous than some of the other potential opponents. On the other hand, North Macedonia and Malta were both bottoms of their pots 4 and pots 5, respectively.
Right, so that creates a huge gap between Ukraine at the top of pot 3 and North Macedonia at the bottom of pot 4. And I think that'll probably be reflected in the odds that we're going to look at next.
Yeah, so the odds to win the group, Italy's at 23%, and England's at 80%. So England are quite a bit favored to win the group. We'll talk about that. Ukraine is just 5.9% to win the group. North Macedonia 1.6%, and Malta 0.1%.
All right, Connor, what do you make of those odds?
I certainly see Italy and England as being closer than the odds suggest. I think it's possibly a bit of a toss-up and may come down to either results between them or else who possibly is spoiled by a team from a lower pot. I see first place belonging to one of those two teams, and really top two are automatic, so it may not matter that much. But I see Italy and England being pretty competitive with each other.
Yeah, I agree. I gotta say, though, I'm really shocked by the 80% odds for England and 23 for Italy, because I see them as fairly close. We saw Italy had the better head-to-head record over England. I'd say England's a bit more consistent in qualifying, but Italy's pretty strong in qualifying. I mean, they only went to a playoff in 2020 because they were grouped with Spain, which is probably the strongest qualifying team. So a bit unlucky as far as that went.
Yeah. How do you see the challenges from below, from Ukraine and North Macedonia?
Yeah, well, my original hook for this episode was the kind of the threat from below, because I think I guess Italy and England could be decided on their head-to-head matches, but I kind of suspect it'll be decided on how consistent they are with the teams below. I think any one of the teams, with the possible exception of Malta, could take points off them. But Malta's a bit of a danger because they do earn a draw in almost every campaign, so they're going to probably get it off someone here, though more likely Ukraine or North Macedonia.
Yeah. I think Ukraine, perhaps galvanized by the war and what's going on is one way to look at it. I mean, they had a pretty strong World Cup 2022 campaign, and were competitive in their Nations League group. So, I mean, it's a bit unlucky for them to be grouped with the two finalists from the last Euro. Because I think in a lot of groups they would have a shot at fighting for that, at least one of the two automatic qualifying spots.
Yeah.
But in this group, I see them as capable of picking up results against the top two, but perhaps not necessarily enough to see them overtake England or Italy.
Yeah, I agree. I think the effect of the war could go either way. On the one hand, it could disrupt them and see them coming in a lot weaker here. But we saw when we did the AFC Asian World Cup qualification that Syria was kind of galvanized by the political situation there, and they weren't even playing at home. They were playing most of their games in UAE. But I wonder if the idea of kind of giving good news to the people is almost their contribution to the war. And I think it would be important for the Ukrainian people to see them challenging these teams at the top would be great.
Yeah.
I agree they're a little unlucky. They're at the top of pot 3, and other pot 2 teams besides England are, Wales, Finland, Scotland. I think they would have a pretty good chance against those teams. But getting England as the pot 2 team here pretty unlucky for the Ukraine.
Yeah. And I do think North Macedonia are an intriguing team. I mean, they won in Germany, recently enough. They won in Italy to knock them out of the World Cup. So their shows are capable of beating teams not just at home, but picking up points on the road as well. They're a little bit unpredictable that way. So I think you look at North Macedonia, they are in a really tough draw as well. I don't think they'll return to make their second consecutive Euro Cup appearance, but they're an intriguing team to watch. They're kind of probably one of the trickier pot four teams to get because of their very recent history of pulling surprises.
I mean, wins over Italy and Germany. If that's not enough to make England shudder a little bit, I don't know what is. I agree with you. I don't see them doing much at the campaign level here, even in as far as challenging for third place against Ukraine. But I definitely see the potential of them almost kind of controlling the group with spoiler results.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's sure to happen. We saw actually with the squad that they have some promising players on the squad. So
yeah, including a couple playing in Italy.
Yeah, that's right. So I think for sure they're gonna steal a couple of points, and the teams they steal the points from may kind of dictate things at the top of the table.
Yeah.
Malta usually gets a draw in every tournament. Do you think that's possible here?
Realistically, probably only possible against North Macedonia. I don't really see them having enough to get points off the other three teams, and even North Macedonia, they're a strong team for kind of the third tier European team. So I'm not sure. I think 1 point at best, but I'm not convinced.
Yeah, I think North Macedonia have been a bit more consistent lately, but they do have, they are an inconsistent team, so I think there is a chance of them giving up points. But Malta taking points off any other team would be a shock, and it really isn't usually off the top teams like we saw with North Macedonia. It's usually off teams like Austria or Scotland or something like that. So yeah, as you say, possibly against North Macedonia. Anyway, this whole time I've been listening to you, humming and hawing, but I'm going to nail you down here. Tell me what it is. How is this group going to end?
Even though Italy have the better recent record than England, I'm going to call England revenge. I think England will finish first in the group. They are very consistent qualifiers ahead of Italy. I do see those as the top two. I see Ukraine third, North Macedonia fourth, Malta fifth, but I don't think the group is, strictly as predictable as the pot order makes it seem.
Right. I agree, especially those odds that are given to England. I do favour England myself because recently their qualifying campaigns have been so strong. But I only give them an edge over Italy, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Italy finish first. But I think the rest of the group is kind of set in cement there. Ukraine, North Macedonia, and Malta. All right, well, we're going to finish the podcast by looking at the opening set of games, which took place in March. So I have been refraining from looking at the results while Connor does know the results. So I'm going to kind of predict what happened, and then Connor's going to say what happened.
Yeah, we start with a huge game, especially for the top two, Italy hosting England. What do you think?
Yeah, so again, we saw those odds for England winning the group. So I think that kind of presumes that they would get something out of this game. But I think it's actually very even. And I might even favor Italy at home here. So I'm going to say 1-1 favoring Italy.
In fact, England were victorious. England were 2-1 winners on the road. So that's a good statement win, especially being away from home.
Great. Who got the goals for them?
Rice and Kane, first half goals. Retegui pulled one back for Italy in the 56th minute, but despite despite that, they couldn't find an equalizer.
All right, so a good start to the campaign there for England. And we have North Macedonia and Malta. Well, I think this is pretty straightforward, a 2-0 win for North Macedonia.
It was 2-1 for North Macedonia. Your prediction was right up until the last 5 minutes when Malta scored a consolation.
Yeah, well, good for Malta getting a goal in that game. And that would put England on top of the group after the first round. But we have the second round also to do, England and Ukraine.
Yeah, England at home.
At home to Ukraine. I believe they might have lost or tied this game in the past. No, I don't think so. England and Ukraine. Again, I kind of think Ukraine might be motivated. It'll be interesting to see how they do here. But England is so consistent at home that I think my prediction would have to be 2-0 England.
And that was a very predictable result. 2-0 England was the final. So comfortable win. Kane and Saka on the score sheet.
All right. And Malta and Italy, a pretty one-sided game here. I don't think this is where Malta's going to get their point. So I will say 2-0 Italy, could be more.
You are correct again. 2-0 Italy. Well done. And for perhaps people thinking that Italy might have gone on to rout Malta, you have mentioned that their goals against is actually quite respectable and even getting better. So 2-0 is kind of, even against a strong team like Italy, is not an atypical result for Malta.
Yeah, a pretty respectable result. When did Italy get those goals?
Both goals were scored before halftime, 15 and 27, and Malta shut the door after that.
Right. Okay, well, we move on to the first set of games in June, which haven't been played, of course. So now you can make a prediction. What do you think for Malta hosting England?
I'm going to say 3-0 England. Kind of a routine victory for England on the road.
Yeah, I got to agree with you there. And if Malta can keep it to 2-0, that would be good. But I think England will score a little bit more. And then a bit of an interesting game here with North Macedonia at home to Ukraine.
Yeah, one of the most interesting games in the group, potentially. I'm pretty torn. I mean, I favor Ukraine to finish ahead of them in the group, but I do think North Macedonia are capable of a draw at home. So I'm going to say 1-1.
That's what I'm going to say too, 1-1. Do you favor any side, or do you think that's pretty flat?
I do favor Ukraine, but not strongly. North Macedonia could win this game as well.
Yeah, I'm 1-1, not particularly favoring either side. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the media cast, so stay tuned. We have a little section on upcoming, present, and past series. And good talking to you about Group C, Connor. We'll see you again in Group D.
See you next time.
All right, we'll finish the podcast today with a look back on what we have covered until now, with a particular focus on which media casts are still relevant. Following that, prior to that, we're going to look at what is upcoming over the rest of the year, because I think that may be of more interest. So we'll put a graphic up with all of this information, both past, current, and present, on the YouTube version, and we'll also include it in the show notes. So let's take a look at upcoming series. So right now we're on Series 14. And I'll give a bit more information about that too. But Series 15 will be a shorter version of Series 14, the 2024 Euro qualifying series. So rather than the detailed history, it'll have a short summary of each team in the group and a section on their recent form. So from there, part 3 of Series 14 will be the same in both the short and long series. That's a comparison of teams through rankings, odds, and head-to-head records, as well as Kevin O'Connor's discussion, and ending with a review of the first 2 sets of games that were played in March 2023. After this Euro 2024 qualifying, 16 and 17, Series 16 and 17 will be a preview of the 2023 Gold Cup, That tournament is set to start on June 24th, 2023. So we plan to put out those podcasts or those media casts in late May or early June. So Series 16 will focus on the groups and teams, and Series 17 will focus on the players of each team. Qualification is actually taking place through the CONCACAF Nations League currently, but we don't intend to do a series on qualification for the CONCACAF Gold Cup there. During the summer, we are planning a series on CONMEBOL, that's South American World Cup 2026 qualifying. That begins in September 2023. We also may get an early start on Asian Cup 2023, although that's due to start later in January 2024. In the fall, we're going to preview the early rounds of AFC World Cup 2026 qualifying. That'll take place in October and November, so we'll do it prior to that. And this will actually give us a first look at some of the weaker teams in the Asian region, which we haven't covered yet. Also, we will preview the 2023 African Cup. It is called that, even though it's due to start in January 2024. So those are the upcoming series, and now let's take a look at our current series. So the current media cast, we call it a media cast because it's available with visuals on YouTube, and it's available as a podcast, and you can find it on most podcast catchers or on our website at soccerfiles.captivate.fm. We'll also put up a graphic with that on it. So the current series is Series 14, and that's a preview of the groups in Euro 2024 qualifying. And this gives us a chance to get to know teams that don't often make it to the tournaments. So it features a deep dive into the Euro Cup qualifying histories of the team. And we started actually after the first round of games in March 2023 to make it a bit more interesting. So as mentioned, we'll follow that with Series 15. That's a shortened version of Euro 2024 qualifying, because some members of the audience don't want such a deep dive. Now, let's look back at our previous MediaCast series, and these are still relevant to various degrees, and well, they tend to be relevant in reverse order, so we'll actually kind of go backwards in time here. So Series 10 to 13 were all based on the 2022 World Cup. Series 10 was an 8-part group-by-group preview of the 4-team groups in the tournament. It featured a deep dive into the World Cup finals history of each team. Series 11 was a 32-part team-by-team preview of players in World Cup 2022. So we didn't know at the time which players would be selected. So we went through the candidates for each position and gave information about them. So that'll still be relevant for a lot of the teams. Series 12 actually featured shortened versions of each of Series 10 and 11. So a shorter version on the teams and on the players. And then Series 13 was a 25-part review or update of the team-by-team players podcast. And it was published after the teams had selected their squads for the finals. So it went through the candidates that we had discussed in Series 11 and introduced any new players that made it to the final squad. Unfortunately, we ran out of time before finishing all 32 teams. And I particularly regret that in the case of Ghana, because they brought a lot of new players in that were not considered in our Series 11 preview of the Ghana players. Anyway, these World Cup podcasts, especially the player ones, are still relevant because the squads haven't changed that much. We will be doing future player podcasts before each major tournament. So going back before that, Series 9 is actually probably the most relevant. It was a 12-part preview of the African Cup 2023 qualifying groups. It's still called African Cup 2023. It was originally set to take place that year, or this year, I should say, but now it's been moved to January 2024. So qualification games were also postponed, and the qualification is still unfinished. So, as I said, that makes it still quite relevant. Series 7 and 8 were both based on the 2021 African Cup, which took place in January 2022. That's good for a look at some of the smaller African teams who made it to the expanded cup. Series 7 was a 6-part overview of the teams in African Cup 2021 or in 2022. It's confusing. It's still called African Cup 2021, but it took place in January 2022. While the overviews were repeated in Series 9, this did feature a deep dive into the African Cup finals history of the participant. Series 8 was a 24-part team-by-team preview of the players for the African Cup. For the African teams that made the 2022 World Cup, the player podcasts will be updated, but for the smaller teams, they won't be. So for many teams, it remains the most relevant. And it has soccer information that doesn't seem to exist in other media casts as far as I know. I'm moving back. Before that, Series 4 and 6 focused on the CONCACAF regions, specifically the 8-team final round of qualifying for the 2022 World Cup. Series 4 was an 8-part look at each team and their players in the final round, and it featured a deep dive into each team's World Cup qualification history. It also had a team-by-team preview of the players in CONCACAF there. It really should have been a separate series number, to be honest, but nevertheless, the current players on the squad were examined for each of the 8 teams. Series 6 was a mid-round update of that CONCACAF 2022 World Cup qualifying campaign. So Series 4 and 6 kind of go together. Series 5, that's in between the two CONCACAF series, was a preview of the Asian World Cup qualifying final round. So this was just a 2-part series on each of the 16 groups that made it to the final round of World Cup qualifying in the Asian region. So this remains relevant for all Asian teams that didn't reach the World Cup, but for Iran, Japan, South Korea, and Saudi Arabia, Series 10 in their World Cup introduction is more current. Series 3 was a 4-part preview for the groups for Gold Cup 2021 in the CONCACAF region, and this remains relevant for some of the smaller teams in the tournament, but again, those who participated in the World Cup were updated after that. Series 2 was a 2-part preview of the groups for Copa America 2021 in the South American region. So that again remains relevant for the smaller teams in the region, but the teams that made the World Cup were updated in Series 10. And our first series was a preview of the 2020 Euro Cup played in 2021. Again, teams that reached the 2022 World Cup were updated there. And it did feature a deep dive into Euro Cup finals history. So again, for the smaller teams that we haven't covered since, it remains relevant. I think that brings us to the end. So keep your eye out for the graphics on the show notes or on the YouTube. And I hope you join us for the upcoming series and even go back and review some of the old series until we update them again. Bye-bye.